Hey everybody, it's Chris from Chris Beat Cancer. Got another amazing cancer healing survival story for you. Dr. Dale Figtree, who was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 1977, the year I was born. Okay, so not to make you feel old, that's not my intention, but her cancer progressed to stage 4. And she went on a radical health and healing journey, changed her whole life, and it took about 3 years. But she healed her cancer with nutrition and natural non-toxic therapies. And she sent me a copy of her book a couple of years ago, which I read immediately. It's called Beyond Cancer Treatment, if you can't see that. And it's a very quick and easy read. And her story is just amazing. I mean, she really is so tough. I mean, like way tougher than I think I was. And yeah, and I mean, her story just really stood out to me. And I've actually shared her healing story on the blog. Some of you may have even read it or seen it in written form. And now we finally just got a chance to do an interview and just like have a great conversation and share it live. So, hi, Dr.
Hi,
Dale.
great to be here.
Great to see you in person. I'm so excited to share your story, and I know it's going to encourage a lot of people and inspire a lot of people, and so yeah, let's do it.
Okay, well, 1977, I was living in New York City, and I was an artist working in a studio that had toxicity to it, okay? And at some point, I just started feeling some pains in my chest and some difficulty breathing. Went and had an x-ray. There was something completely blocking my left lung, and just took me in the hospital, put me through 2 weeks of testing. At that time, they didn't have CAT scans, just lots of x-rays and different things. Finally, they said, we cannot tell what it is. We need to go in and do surgery. So I was cut like halfway around my body. They went in through my ribs. And what they found was I had a grapefruit-sized tumor that was outside my lung, but attached to my lung, my heart, my main arteries.
Wow.
And they said it was completely unremovable. And so they took a biopsy, and they accidentally cut my left vocal cord, which was paralyzed. I have one paralyzed vocal cord, but I've been able to overcompensate. And they sewed me back up. And they told me that what I had was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was stage B2. And they said that there was no chemotherapy that could destroy it, but there was some chemotherapy that could sort of slow it down. And they said that the best chance was radiation. I think there was like a 10% chance that radiation, if it was a first stage, could do the job. So I ended up having the chemotherapy and the radiation. After 2 months, and the chemotherapy, it seemed kind of mild. I never lost my hair. I didn't have much symptoms. I lost my hair color. For 2 months, it grew in lighter, and then it grew. And then they took me off it. They said it was destroying my immune system, and that was that. And then my hair color returned to normal. I had like a halo, as it was growing out. And I had radiation 5 days a week for 6 months. And now, they say they would never, never give anybody that much radiation. But nonetheless, they kept checking. It seemed like the tumor was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Finally, I reached the absolute limit they said I could ever have radiation in my lifetime in that area. They waited a month to just let it shrink and see the results. And I went back, and my doctor said, well, he said, the tumor is shrunken, but it's still the size of a walnut. And he said, there's really nothing else we can do. And that was just completely blew me away. I said, well, why can't you go in now and take it out? It's much smaller. And he said, because of all the radiation, that the tissues would just fall apart. And I said, well, aren't there any studies? Aren't there any special, this is 1977. Nothing. Okay. I mean, he literally said, there's nothing. He said, before throwing you into heavy duty chemotherapy, which will change your life, he said, let's just let things calm down, and let's just wait and just check you, see what happens. And, on one hand, that was a magnificent moment, because on one hand, there was the horrors. On the other hand, it was an absolute wake-up call.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
I just want to say 2 things. So they shrunk it from a grapefruit to a walnut.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, that's pretty good, but not all the way. And then, which is very common, right? Like,
Right.
chemo and radiation will shrink tumors. Like, we know that. Most of the time, they will shrink the tumor to some degree for some period of time, but in many cases, they do not eliminate the tumor or cure the cancer. And what you just said, I wanted to just second what you were just about to get into, which was sometimes bad news is actually good news in disguise.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to say that right before I finished the chemotherapy, the whole treatment, I came across a book. There was this book. There was an alternative book, and it just spoke about the chemo drugs that I'd taken, and I had no idea that they could be as problematic as this book said. And then about radiation, it said it was easy to shrink the major amount of a tumor, but the small core many times was almost impossible to eradicate. And
yeah, and those are like the cancer stem cells.
Nobody tells me that. And then when they told me, well, the major part of the tumor was shrunk, but there's still this, it was like, what?
Yeah, the cancer stem cells are usually the ones that survive treatment. And so the cells that are not really aggressive, they're not really spreading, they're just making up the tumor, are the ones that they're killing. But they're not really killing the instigators, the generals, right? The commanders, the ones that will spread and to other parts of the body and start new tumors. So that's a problem. So there you were with terrible news.
Yeah, so I was discharged with what's considered a guarded prognosis. Okay, it was not a remission because guarded prognosis. So I went home and I was involved in meditation and yoga at that time. And I went home and I just sat down, I lit a candle, and I asked for help. I asked from spirit, I asked from ancestors, I just asked from people that love me, whatever. I asked for help, I asked for guidance, asked for healing, I asked for support. And the next day it was like a tsunami. Tsunami came. It was like things just started. I thought, were these things like coming all the time, but I didn't notice them before? I mean, it was weird. I'd have a thought about, I need to do this, and a car would go by with a license plate saying, go for it, So it was kind of fascinating. So people called and they were like, oh, I forgot a big piece of the story. Okay. I need to back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 months into treatment, my doctor called me in and showed me my x-rays, and he showed me a new round spot, and he said, it seems like there's a new tumor. I spoke to my whole staff. They agree it's metastasis. We need to start you in radiation in the second area immediately tomorrow. And so I went home just in a panic state, writing my will, just thinking, because I was told my only chance for survival had been if this hadn't metastasized, and now I'm getting this news.
And how old were you?
27.
Got it.
27. So I went home just shaken to the core, and I called my yoga teacher, who was my kind of spiritual mentor at the time. She was in Florida, I was in New York, and she said, I'll be home during the weekend, we'll get together, we'll work together. She said, in the meantime, I just want you to light a candle and sit, just go into some meditation, whatever. I said, okay. So I lit a candle, and I couldn't go into any meditation. My mind was just crazy. It was just too crazy. So I decided instead to do a visualization. And I visualized all the cancer cells in a volcano, so they were contained. And they were like black spiders clumped together on top of each other. And around the top of the volcano were like 100,000 white blood cells, like white knights in armor with lances. With a clash of cymbals, they came riding down and just pierced and cut every single cancer cell, and they'd putter and dissolve and dissolve and dissolve. And I'm doing this, 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 I'm doing this. And I mean, like 40 minutes go by, and I'm just doing this. I mean, it's like there's no mind involved. I'm not even thinking about the time. I'm just looking and looking and looking. And suddenly, it was like I couldn't find any more. And it was like pink, healthy cells and almost like a blue sky. And I thought, well, that's it. Okay, I'm finished. So I opened my eyes. And I just found myself like almost in a state of reverie. And the fear was completely gone. And I felt that was the gifting because I was just non-functional. And so I had a nice dinner, a good night's sleep. When I went to the hospital the next day, I was just very present with the day. It wasn't like I was thinking, I've got this cancer, I may be dying. I go in and the doctors say, we need to re-x-ray the new lump to get the exact measurements so we can just set you up in radiation this morning. And they x-rayed me, and my doctor walked in the room looking really perplexed. And he said, we cannot find the new lump. We think that maybe yesterday when you had the other one, you had breath in your lungs or was positioned differently. We're going to do a lot of shots to, and they never found it again. So, and in a way, it was so weird for me because it was like, I was told I had this tumor, of course, what I couldn't feel, and I had this treatment, radiation. You just sit there, you don't like really feel anything, and then they tell me there's this thing, and now they tell me that there's not this thing. I mean, in some strange way, it's like secondhand information. So, I mean, I was kind of like, in a way, a little bit stunned, but, but the thing that really hit me was that I saw that, wow, there's a way to be involved in this. Like before that, it was like I was just doing what the doctors told me to do. And this point, I thought, when I get radiation for the main tumor, I can now work with it. I can just, start being involved. So this was an opening, and a powerful opening. So I quickly had gone from stage 4 back to stage 2.2B. So, okay.
Well, yeah, and you went from being a passenger to the driver, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And then I went back to being the passenger. Once they tell you, once the pressure's off to some degree, it's like it's just easy to slip back into, just not really getting it.
All the routines.
Yeah. So, but this second time I was discharged, I really got it. And so I began intensive visualization practice, like 3 times a day. I'd set a clock for like 10 minutes because I'd feel like that was the time I could stay really focused. And it was very creative. I mean, I did all sorts of things, and it was just stories about that are written in the book, just a lot of synchronicities. And then books were sent to me that really resonated. I don't know if you remember the books by Carlos Castaneda, but I mean, there were just things he was saying, like, if most people see life as a series of gifts and disasters, but a warrior sees everything as a challenge, so I really got that this was my warrior time, not negative, not positive, challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and I embraced that. And then someone called me and said, there's a name of an extraordinary doctor who works with nutrition, and he's got a reputation for miraculous healing. And if you're interested, here's his number. So I called him and spent about 20 minutes on the phone explaining my situation. And he said that he'd have a secretary call me back, which he never did. So I called him in a few days and left messages and messages and messages. And after about a week, I realized he wasn't going to call me back. So he was the only card in my hand. I mean, this is 1977. It's not like today. There was like nothing else. Okay. So I just called. I mean, I badgered him, please call me back. It's like, I just want one consultation. If you don't want to be, finally he calls back. And he first insists I go see a colleague of his who was about 110 years, about 90 years old in Harlem, an old doctor who checks me out and says, okay. So I saw him. His name was Juan Curcio, Dr. Juan Curcio. What I didn't know at the time was he had been arrested 4 times for treating people with cancer with food. It was illegal in those days. And he was scared. I mean, he didn't want to touch more people in that situation. But I got through, and he brought me on board. And the irony is that, he was an old man. He died a few years later. He didn't write books. He didn't train people because he was just so harassed, and you saw him in secret and things like that. The irony is that I was one of the few people to carry on the mantle, to carry on his just brilliant work. And of course, it wasn't exactly his work because it came from a tradition called natural hygiene, which was like 200 years old. I don't know if you ever heard of Herbert Shelton in the early 19th. Yeah, that was his thing. But it went on to, the history of trusting that the body has a capacity for self-healing if you know how to support that self-healing.
Yeah.
Okay. So he put me on this diet, which there was no question in my mind that I wouldn't do it perfectly. I mean, this was just like a total gift. So I just accepted whatever you give me, I'm going to do. And he didn't even say, come back in a month, but I thought, I'm going to see you. So I went home, and it was just an enormous amount of food. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But I did everything. It was 3 juices a day, only vegetables, no fruit in the juices. And it was as though he said to me, I want you to eat a huge plate of vegetables and fruit 3 times a day, the beginning of the meal, not the whole meal, just the beginning of the meal. And it was like laughable that anybody could eat that. But he said, we're going to juice half of it, and we're going to blend the other half. And like that, simple to eat. Okay. So every meal was this juice and this blended salad, like a gazpacho. And for breakfast, after that was a pound of fruit. It was like 3 apples and then, a few ounces of raw nuts. And lunch was similar, but just many, like a quarter pound of nuts. And dinner was like a juice, another blended salad, a pound of vegetables, and then the entree would change. Like sometimes it was a pound of yams or a huge plate of brown rice and lentils or different things like that. Well,
And it sounds like it was very similar to what I did in that it was maybe 80 to 90% raw food, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the theme that keeps coming up over and over and over of everyone I interview. Plant-based diet,
Yeah.
no animal food, and tons of raw food
Yeah. It's interesting
and
because,
juices.
yeah, as a health practitioner now, of course, the ketogenic diet has become like the fad.
Yeah.
And, what I say to people when they say, it makes so much sense, it's, da, 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 da. I just say, go on to chrisbeatcancer.com, go on to radicalremissions.org. Just read the stories. The stories, practically 95% of the stories are people eating tons of vegetables and fruit and nuts and not on a ketogenic diet,
Right.
but tons of food. Just read the stories. And it's like talk is cheap. And, so people can decide for themselves. But my diet was just an enormous amount of food. And I think the difference, when a lot of people come to see me, they say, well, I'm on a healthy diet, which is wonderful. But there's a difference between a healthy diet and an amplified diet.
Yeah. Well, and everybody thinks they're on a healthy diet. That's the problem. You have to sort of break those false beliefs first, right? Where they think, "Oh, I'm eating low-fat yogurt and, Diet Cokes. I'm on a healthy diet."
I thought I was on a healthy diet before, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, almost everyone I've ever met who said they were eating healthy, when I actually investigated what they were eating, I'm like, it really wasn't. It really wasn't that healthy. It was, some aspects were healthy, but a lot of aspects weren't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that really differentiated Dr. Kurtz's work from other people that were working with nutrition was just the huge quantities that he insisted you eat.
Yeah.
Well, for the first 2 weeks, I could do breakfast, I could do lunch, but dinner, I'd be halfway through and I'd be completely full. But I was committed to doing this, so I'd take a nap or I'd read, and I wouldn't go to sleep until every drop of food was consumed. And I went to sleep for the first 2 weeks bloated, with stomach aches. It was not easy. But to me, I had no choice. I can't even tell you, there wasn't even a thought to not do it.
Right.
I just knew I had to do it, okay? And after 2 weeks, something happened like that. It was like my body became a sponge. I could just lap up the food quickly, these large quantities. And if I had friends eating with me that were eating similar foods, if they left some, I'd say, I'll take that too. And it was just a matter of conditioning my body to taking that quantity of food. And my body loved it.
Yeah. There is an adaptation period in the beginning when you change to a radically healthy diet, especially with tons of fruits and vegetables and lots of raw food. And it does take a couple weeks typically for your body to adjust and adapt. And you might feel like crap and low energy, like you said, bloated, and the first little bit of it might be difficult and you might feel bad. And as you know, there's detox reactions that also happen when you start doing a hardcore healthy diet too. So all of that compounded on itself can make you feel pretty crappy and can make people want to give up because they're like, oh, I don't have any energy and I'm hungry and I'm, craving this or that. And it's like, you just got to push through. Like, you've got to be committed for the long term, because within a week or two, usually, you start feeling great. I had the same experience.
It's helpful if you have a practitioner that can walk you through it. You can call up and say, what's wrong? I'm eating all this healthy food. Why is my energy so low? Why am I having headaches? Why am I having loose stools? And it's, I warn people ahead of time. I say, when your body has this huge amount of nutrients that empowers the foundation to work the best it's capable of, the first thing the body's going to want to do is just clear out the waste. It's not going to want to build on shaky ground. And so clearing out the waste, the energy gets sucked inside. Like when you have a flu, you don't have less energy. It's just focused on the immune system. So people start to understand that. And so for me, the first few weeks, I had all of that. I had loose stools. I had low energy, but I caught a cold almost, within 7 days. And usually when I got colds, it was like I was just completely clogged, but there was no clogging. It was just flushing, flushing, flushing. And I was blowing out this mucus that looked like it had little black strings in it. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't have the money at that time to take it to a lab and find out what it was. But I mean, considering the radiation, who knows? Anyway, but my doctor was there to walk me through it, and he would explain, rest, rest, rest. When I hear people that come and say, I'm on this radical diet and I'm going out and I'm just doing all this workout, what I say to them is there's a time for workout. Workout is magnificent. But in the beginning, to give your body the fullest amount of choice to choose where it wants to use its energy could be much wiser, and just resting, doing exercise like stretching, restorative yoga, easy walking, but absolutely taking naps and really allowing the body to be focused inside.
I absolutely agree. I mean, exercise is wonderful and beneficial, but it does divert the body's energy from healing. It can, right, if it's done too excessively or too aggressively. And walking and rebounding and stretching and yoga and like all these things are so wonderful. And I just, I encourage people to get out there and get sweaty and exercise, but at the same time, listen to your body, right?
Yeah.
So there's a time for rest.
There's a time, and there's a time for exercise. And I tell people there'll be a time when I say, go for it. But in the beginning, it's like, just trust the body. So I went through 6 months of just going through detox, and I started losing weight. When I first got out of the hospital, oh, by the way, I was in the hospital for 6 weeks in the beginning, and I had gone from 120 pounds to 105 pounds. And when I got out, before I saw this doctor, there was almost this obsessive thing to just eat. And I was just, even though I thought I had a healthy diet, at this point, I was just eating anything because my body had such an intense craving. And I gained that weight back within a month. And then the craving went away. And then I saw this doctor. And as soon as I started eating this food, within 2 months, that 15 pounds just dropped. And we're not talking about somebody that could lose weight. And we're not talking about a low-calorie diet. But it was junk food. It was junk tissue. My body just immediately got rid of it. And on the exact same food, within 4 months, I gained all my weight back. I mean, to see the weight loss and weight gain on the same amount of food was startling. I mean, I'd never seen that in my life before, which encourages me to trust that weight loss is not about depriving the body. It's actually about feeding the body intelligently. And the body doesn't want to carry excess weight. It will get rid of excess weight even with normal calories. So Anyway, I was a witness to that.
Well, I love that. I mean, I just love the idea and the way you phrased it about it shedding this junk tissue, right? Because we see this all the time when people convert and do the kind of things that I did, eating lots of raw food, fruits and vegetables, and they lose weight, and they lose weight really fast, and they get concerned, like, oh, I'm losing weight. I need to take a protein powder or protein shake or something. And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't. Unless you're like 70 pounds or something. Like your body is breaking stuff down. It's shedding it, doesn't need it. Like, you'll be fine. You just keep eating every day and you'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, I really need to ask my clients to just trust the process for a bit of time, because their oncologists are freaking out that they're dropping some weight, and so I try to have a conversation, with all of us. Anyway, I guess after 3 months, I went back and saw my doctor, and I walked in his room, and he had this big smile. I mean, my medical doctor, he had this big smile, and he said, according to your blood work, you're my healthiest patient. And he said, according to the x-rays, and he was just shaking his head, he said, the lump is still there, but it hasn't changed. And he said, I don't really understand, because you had a highly malignant, fast-growing tumor. And he said, what are you doing? And so I explained to him about the diet and the visualization and the rest and this and that. It was like, well I'll mention it in a minute. And he just kind of said, he said, I don't understand, but keep doing what you're doing. And so that was really the last time I really ever worked with that doctor. I mean, I saw him a few other times. Oh, actually, yeah. And but then it was like the green light that I needed to go home and to just continue even more committedly. So I feel like what I did was I created like an alchemical container, almost like a pressure cooker. And I put in it all of those things that I felt would support my healing, from nutrition to rest to books, to walks. I'm an artist, so I also was doing some art that I felt connected. And, the things that didn't serve healing, I felt like I put them on the shelf, alcohol, movies that raised my adrenaline, never forget it. Whatever didn't serve, I put on the shelf with the hopes that one day I'd be able to bring them back. But just the things that would serve healing, I put in this container and like sealed it and cooked. And the intensity was just amazing. And my dream started reflecting. I'll just tell you a very quick dream that I had, which was quite incredible in the beginning. I was in a rowboat in the dream on a big ocean with no oars and nothing around, just drifting into oblivion, which is kind of a classic dream for people that are in the process of dying, okay? And suddenly this big cruise ship comes up and picks me up and takes me into their kitchen. And there's this case with these cakes, and I'm looking from cake to cake with these thick butter icings, and I'm salivating. And the waiter comes over and he says, "I'd like to take your order. What will you have?" And I straightened up and I said, "I'll have a salad, please." And to me, that dream was really a reflection that the choice had been made. I was saved kind of by a collective force. It wasn't by one thing. And the food was definitely, a part of it. So my dreams seemed to reflect progress along the way, which was also a wonderful part of this.
Well, I just want to say I love the pressure cooker analogy because that just rings so true to my situation too, right? I mean, I was just, every aspect of my life became focused on healing, and I eliminated everything that could possibly promote disease, right? And so it was a very intense time, right? And people around me did not understand and thought I was just losing my mind. And at one point, my wife even said to me, she said, "I don't like who you're turning into." Yeah. And that was really tough, right? Because I was just getting I was so laser focused, right? And like, now all of a sudden overnight, I'm a raw foodist, I'm juicing, I'm doing all these things. I was becoming a different person. And she was, kind of worried, like, who are you turning into, right? And I was, of course, trying to convert her along the way, and she didn't want to hear it at the time. She's totally on board with me now. But it was really tough. But at the same time, like, I was right there where you were, like that intense, like, pressure, which is good because you were just like, to me, the idea I had was like, I want to overdose on nutrition, right? Yeah. Like, and which is what you were doing too. Like, I'm going to just jam so much good stuff in my body, like that it has no choice but to heal. That was kind of my, my thought process.
Yeah, and it was like you're being a warrior, which is needed at times in our lives.
Yeah, and the warrior mentality too is, and the challenge, like you mentioned earlier, is like I saw it as a challenge. I didn't see it as really an obstacle. I mean, it was just like, look, I got to do this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. And, the fight, the cancer battle and the fight that you always hear people refer to me was more of a mental battle than a physical battle, right? It was just winning the battle in my mind over my body.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and, there's always sacrifice. I mean, things need to be sacrificed. And I once read something like, for healing to take place, there always has to be change. So there were sacrifices and there were gains. But for me, there was not even, I didn't feel like there was even choice. My mind wasn't, oh, should I do this? Do I need to do it? It was like, so anyway, I went back to see Dr. Curcio a second time, and he said, "How are you?" And I kind of lied to him. I was feeling weak. I was losing weight, and I was afraid to tell him how bad I was feeling because I thought he'd just say, "Forget it." So I said, "Oh, I'm feeling good. I'm doing pretty good." And then, so he didn't say anything, just sort of scribbled out my new program, changed a few things, changed the nuts and fruit and different things, changed my juice and gave it back to me. And by the third time I saw him, I had lost those 15 pounds. I had gotten so weak at times when just walking up the steps, I had to sit at the top of the steps to catch my breath. I mean, it was scary, but I was warned this could happen. I'm taking a lot of rest. And he says, "How are you doing?" And it was like I couldn't fly anymore. So I kind of burst into tears. And I said, "Horrible." I said, I'm going through this. And he went, yay, it's working. From that point on, we bonded. From that point on, it was almost like he took me under his, his care, and he'd answer any of my questions. And, I'm an artist, but I also was always fascinated by science, by how things worked. And so little did I know that my education was beginning. And I just had all sorts of questions about this food and that and this. And so he'd spend the time. And, I saw him every month for several years. I mean, that was like my go-to. And also another great gift was that I was part of this community, like a yoga community. And so I was kind of protected. I mean, I lived in a house with several people and a yoga teacher, and it was just, I had the protection. And after a while, everybody worked with Dr. Curcio. Cancer, no cancer. It was like, it made sense. And eventually people were like, there was a kitchen where they were making food for everybody. I mean, what would take me hours then became just like a gift. It was really shocking. But it also protected me from my parents in a way, who I was kind of keeping in the dark a bit because I didn't want to alarm them. I didn't want to tell them when there were ups or downs. And I just didn't need that pressure of them freaking out and saying, you've got to do this and that. Anyway, 3 years go by, and I'm just getting better and better. And I have these cycles where I'd go into a detox, and I'd know for 3 weeks, maybe a month, my energy is going to be low. I might have loose stools. My skin may break out terribly. I might, have sweats that are smelled like, radiation. And then it would pass. And then it would happen again, and then it would pass. And I just got to know this. But meanwhile, I'm having a sense of just my inner core becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. Until I reached a period one day where I just started coughing up like golf ball sized mucus kind of blobs. And I thought, what's this? And it went on for like 2 weeks without any cold or infection or anything. And then suddenly my eyes started to not be able to focus. And then I was just hit with a fever of 104. Then it dropped to 103. And I didn't know what hit me, but my doctor, I was in touch with him. He said, this is the big one. He said, I feel like this is the big one. Hang in there. He altered my program a bit. At the same time, in this community, there was a medical doctor, and he really encouraged me. I want you to get another x-ray. I want you to get tests, roll out pneumonia, roll out this, roll out that. The x-ray was basically the same. The lump hadn't changed, but there was horrendous scar tissue that was like spider webs. It's getting harder to see. And no pneumonia, no sign of infection. And so it gave me the green light to surrender, just surrender. And so I just laid in bed, and for the first month, my fever went probably from like 103 to 102. I started having pains in the area where I had had cancer, but I somehow just trusted. And a chiropractor adjusted me, that helped. And then I took a tennis ball and cut it in half. And I would lie on it on my back in a certain area, and it would completely numb the nerve that was causing the pain, and I would be fine. And I had people that brought me food. I mean, I was in an extraordinary situation. Had I been around my family and my parents, I would be in the hospital. They would have just pushed me. So there was a lot of grace involved in the situation. But meanwhile, a month went by. I lost 10 pounds. I still had fever. And it was like my friend that was a doctor just said, I never saw anybody with a fever for a month. And so I was down to 110. And this went on for the next month. It was 100 and 100. Still had 102. And the next month, I was 90. And it was scary. And I want to say that I felt like I detoxed from every part of my body, from my hair to my skin to my eyes to my joints. I mean, I went through like a week of weirdness almost with every single part of my body through this entire thing. Okay. But finally it reached a point where I was so weak and I was so thin that I thought, maybe I can die from detoxing. I mean, maybe people can just fade away. And it was just getting to that point where it was just everybody around me actually thought I was dying. A friend came to see me, and she just looked at me, and she burst into tears and went out crying. So I just sat, and I just thought, okay, I've gone through this for 4 months, enough. And I went inside, and with the most ferocity I could muster up, I literally said, enough. And within 4 days, it changed. Within 4 days, my fever was normal. I think within a week, I'd gained like 5 pounds. And it was like it shifted. And then I started breaking out in all the symptoms of chemotherapy and radiation. I want to tell you, it was beyond belief. My hair started to grow. I'd lose my hair color again, the same amount of growth, and then grow in again. Sores in the exact same place, rashes the exact same place, sweats with the same smell. I mean, there was no question in my mind that the radiation and chemotherapy residue from 3 years ago was being absolutely flushed from my body. And it seemed to take 4 months to get into those areas and dislodge them to the point where, this was not something that was going to happen immediately. And I didn't understand it, but the body's complex and I just trusted it. My doctor trusted it, and we just let it unfold. And so slowly, I mean, it took me 6 months. I regrew a new body. My weight was distributed differently. My hair was healthier. My skin was healthier. My menstrual cycle, which had been irregular my whole life, was absolutely perfect. I mean, it was a transformation at a depth that I never knew was possible. I'd never met anybody that had gone through it. And what it has done, I mean, not only has it served to probably work out almost every kink that, was ever there, but it gave me the confidence to work with people in a way that I don't think that I would have confidence if I hadn't gone through that myself. Very few people that I've worked with or seen need to go through something that extreme. Once in a while, there's, there are things, but to have gone through it myself has been a benefit for other people. So shortly after that, I mean, I slowly began to put on weight, get stronger. And then suddenly one day I bent down to pick something up and my heart just went into a wild heartbeat, like 200 beats a minute. And I lied down and it just wouldn't stop. And I called a friend that was a nurse in our group and she came over. She said, we have to take you to the hospital immediately. They took me to the hospital. They gave me a Valium and it slowed down. But they took an x-ray and they said it looked like my heart was enlarged and the scar tissue was so crazy they couldn't make anything out. And they said, we have to send you back to New York. I was in Florida at the time. I had moved down there with this group. They said, we have to send you back to New York to see your original doctor because we can't make any sense of this. So I went back to New York. My doctor met me at the door, went into a small room, did a quick examination and said, chances are the cancer's come back, but now we have new medicine and blah, blah, blah. I mean, meanwhile, in my mind, I'm plotting my escape, right? So I'm in the hospital a week and they're doing all these tests. And it was a teaching hospital, New York hospital. And the doctors would come around and I tell them my experience the last 3 years in this incredible detox. They thought I was out of my mind. I mean, they just thought I was out of my mind. They couldn't make sense of any of it. But while I was there, I just did intensive visualization. My mother came to the hospital and brought my juicer. I maintained my diet in the hospital. And the last thing was finally a CAT scan. And I just did an intensity while I was waiting for this CAT scan. And the next day, my doctor came in and he just said, there's no trace of cancer that we can find. You're discharged. And it was like I just broke down and cried. I think the first time I left the hospital, it was like I was kind of in a fog. And, but the second time, I saw people in treatment that were just going through horrendous things. And I don't know what I would have done had things been different, but it was like it really, those 3 years, I mean, the whole thing really hit home. And I just was in an absolute state of gratitude and deep, deep relief. And, that really was my x-rays now. And, they show so much scar tissue, which I'm dealing with now. The scar tissue after 40 years causes this and that. The reason my heart was a little bit looked enlarged was simply because it seems like I'd caught an infection that a lot of people with radiation do, called pericarditis, where the heart's fine, but the sac around it fills with fluid. And the scar tissue had hardened the sac, so it couldn't expand, so it pressed in, and it caused that extra heartbeat. But by the time I had the CAT scan, they said, you're better. It's like, what? It's cleared, not a problem. And so that was that. And that was really from And what happened since, and then two things. So somebody says to me about a year later, well, how much longer are you going to have to be on this diet for? And I said to them, I'm hoping at least another 60 years. And the second thing is that people started to call me. They had heard of me from friends. And my doctor now was retired and he was on his way out. And so there weren't people that were carrying this tradition. And so I started giving people some hints here and there and telling my story. Finally, I thought, look, I'm just going to write it in a book and say, just buy the book, selling at a cost. But I knew that people needed the support with detox. Whatever. And one day it just hit me that, this information needs to be around. And I started to look at schools that I could go to, get a degree and work with people. And, I touched upon a school that asked to see the book, immediately gave me a scholarship, which otherwise I couldn't have afforded, and just ended up really having the gift to be able to pass on this gift to others. And that's really what I've done, and I've, since then I've my book is out there, which tells my story, but half of it is a workbook. It talks about working on different levels like visualization. It talks about the diet I was on. It talks about detoxification, what to expect. So it's a good primer for people to just get an idea of, one person's path, but also, basic common sense things, And then a few years later, as I started seeing clients, I saw people's habits, are so deeply rooted. We could reach people as when they're children before those habits are really struck. So I wrote another book called Eat Smart, Feel Great. And I illustrated it because I also do illustration. And it's a funny story. It's an illustrated story that's, you can just see a little bit, about a guy it was actually my stepson who came to me a little overweight, was very resistant to make any changes until he just was like so big. He was just bullyish and miserable, and finally came and said, will you help me? And just sat down and figured out how to make foods he loved in really healthy ways, and this ended up being a story, and then there are recipes in the back, and it's just a way for children because they love to know how things work. If you can present it in ways that are simple and clear, it kind of can click. And then
I want a copy.
Oh, my pleasure.
I want a copy of that.
Yeah. Recently, in the last 2 years, my clients have been saying, is there a cookbook I could get that, follows your things? And, this cookbook is good, but there's some things I'm not crazy about. And this cookbook, so finally I decided after 40 years to put all these recipes into a book. And I wrote a book. It's called Delicious, Nutritious, and Simple. And it's just fabulous recipes that are delicious, nutritious, and simple. And of course, that healthy food can be as delicious, if not more so, than other stuff. So
absolutely, I want a copy of that too.
My pleasure. Go away.
So, oh my gosh, your story is just so amazing to me, and what you said a minute ago about it just made me think about how not uncommon it is for cancer to sort of make that final last stand, right, in the healing process, where there's this major flare up and it just seems like everything's going downhill. And it's like, someone told me this years ago, I don't even know who, but it's like, no, that's cancer's last stand, right? It's making one more just last ditch effort against you, right? And that's the part where you have to be, not let the fear take over, not rush into some radical procedure or whatever that's experimental or unproven or not successful or whatever. And just, you've got to power through, right? And trust the process and just keep, it's just amazing to me. I'm just so impressed and inspired by how much suffering you endured post therapy. And those 4 months were running a fever and just losing weight and just feeling terrible. I'm sure you were struggling with a lot of discouragement and anxiety and fear during that time. And I never had to go through something that intense. I pretty much started to feel good within a few weeks of, the raw food diet and all that stuff. And it I had ups and downs, and I had days where I felt like didn't feel great, or weeks where I didn't feel great, but nothing that intense.
Mhm. Well, I think the 6 months of radiation, I mean, who knows the art materials that I was around that were toxic. You say I must have been filled with anxiety and the rest of it, but I'll tell you something. Something stepped in, and there was a lot of grace. People have brought me these books. One was written about Christ, another Buddha, whatever. Something happened, and I just felt that I was bathed in kind of a cocoon. I just felt that there was some kind of grace around that kind of allowed me to just rest and not get complicated. The one thing that did happen was interesting. Somebody told me this, that they were talking to someone, and they said, how could Dale just lie there, and why isn't she more proactive? And the yoga teachers sort of yelled at this person and said, you have no idea what she's going through, don't judge her. But when I heard that, I thought, is there more I could be doing? And I was sort of so kind of weak that I'd given up the visualization. So I thought I could still be doing the visualization and kind of prayer work too. So that night I just sat and I lit a candle and I was just doing some visualization. I was like so sleepy. I was just nodding and nodding, but I was fighting it. And I just bring myself back and bring myself back. And suddenly after about 15 minutes, I brought myself back and I was completely wide awake, completely clear and energized. And I did the visualization work and I couldn't sleep that night. It was like I had just this energy had descended that was just so strong, that, and who, at any given moment, was that the defining moment? Was this a defining moment? I asked, and I feel like I received a lot of grace in this. And to separate that, people say, what is the defining thing that you think was the initial reason you healed? Of course, I think nutrition was a huge part of it. I don't feel like I would be here if it weren't for the nutrition piece. Let me just say that. But it's hard for me to say whether that was the defining piece. There was, so many levels, the grace, the gifts. I mean, it's like I'm just open to appreciating them all. And I encourage people, work on every level, just be creative and keep. From my mind, I always kept a not knowing. I was never overly positive, like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm cured, And I was never overly negative. I saw that fear empowered me to be more proactive, but it could also contaminate me and freeze me. So whenever my mind got into like the craziness that the mind will absolutely get into, absolutely, I would just bring it to that not knowing, but I'm doing the best I can. And, it's, I think I still have that philosophy. So,
I really do too. And the one thing that, that fear can be useful for is
absolutely.
to motivate you to change, right? To motivate you to like, be serious about healing, be serious about the diet, be serious about meditation, visualization and exercise, right? So you like channel that fear into action, and that's like the best thing you can do with it, instead of letting it paralyze you into inaction, right? Because those are the two scenarios, right?
I tell people fear is appropriate. You're fighting for your life. It's appropriate, but use it well. And for me, when fear would become really strong, and there were times, of course, it would, I would put it into visualization. My visualization would be like rocket fuel. So yes, fear is appropriate and it can be used to empower. Definitely.
Something else I like to say about fear, and this was inspired by lots of things I've read, but, courage is not the absence of fear, right? It's not the absence of fear. And fear courage is what you do in spite of fear. Right. That's taking action in spite of fear. That's when people say like, oh, I don't feel brave, I don't feel courageous. I didn't either. You know what brave feels like? It feels like fear. That's what courage feels like. You're afraid and you go forward anyway. That's courage.
Yeah. So I think they may be connected to some degree.
Yeah. No, you cannot have courage without fear.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it's possible. If you're not afraid, then whatever you're doing doesn't require courage. So fear is appropriate. I love that. It's part of the process, and you have to learn how to channel it and use it to your benefit and use it to inspire you. I just love that so much. You're just so full of wisdom, and I cannot wait to get this interview out. It's going to encourage and inspire a lot of people. And you better hang on, because your email or phone or whatever is probably going to blow up after this goes live.
I work with a lot of people actually around the world on Skype. And
good. Yeah, because I just know a lot of people are going to just see just what a huge heart you have. And it's clear, just the voice of experience just comes out of every pore when you speak about this and tell your story. So that's just amazing to me, and I'm just so glad. My only regret is that I didn't make time to do this interview sooner. But hey, timing, it's probably perfect timing. So
probably perfect timing.
Yeah. So that's great. Well,
and, I want to thank you first of all for all that you do. As I'd mentioned earlier, it's like when clients come to see me, one of the first things I do is just send them your file that has to do with questions to ask their oncologist. I feel it's so important for people to understand the ramifications of what their choices are going to be. And as a nutritionist and a health practitioner, I mean, I would never make those choices and tell people do this or don't do this. As a matter of fact, I'm in one of those usual situations where I went through chemo, I went through radiation, and I also did this. So it's not like I was an absolute purist. And so I accept where people are at. I don't try to judge them, but I say to them, before you make decisions, be educated, look at all of the sides, and ask your oncologist these questions. And check out Chris's website and read all those stories about the survivors. And, it's like, be educated before you make that choice. And I trust that the wisdom that they uncover will guide them correctly.
Yeah, it's so important to make an informed decision. And as you know, and you and I both know from our personal experience and observing others, most cancer patients have no idea what they're getting into. They barely even understand their disease, and they're rushed into treatments they don't understand.
It's fear. It's just fear motivated.
Right.
Fear motivated, not wisdom motivated.
100% fear motivated. Without the facts, and without much faith either. It's just all fear. And so, yeah, that's, we have the same mission. It's like, I want to educate people. I want to empower them to make the best decision for them. And I want to keep pointing them toward success stories, because we learn from the success of others. Like, if you want to be successful, you need to emulate successful people. And it's like, look, a lot of people have healed cancer. We're collecting these stories every day, at least I am, and trying to share them. And it's not about me at all. It's like, yeah, okay, I've got a story and it's inspirational. That's great. But look at all these others that, frankly, so many of them I think are even better than mine. Like, yours is like, wow, so powerful. So that's what just gets me excited, is like just sharing all those amazing stories, because I know they encourage people, and I know they'll see the common threads, right? They'll connect the dots, right?
So you just need to make available the information that is there, and of course the web has changed that dramatically. But honestly, the work you do, it's obviously it's affected so many people, and it's changed people's lives. And this information had to get out there, and you're that first generation of people that are getting it out there, and it's magnificent. And, the light ultimately emerges. And to me, that's what this is about. So.
Well, just trying to be helpful.
Me too.
Just trying to be helpful, and I guess I have been. So anyway, helpful and humble. But again, Dr. Dale, it's what a thrill, and a pleasure to speak with you and hear your story. And where can people find you?
Okay, well, I have a website, which is dalefigtree.com, and my email address is there, and my telephone number is there, and I do work with people. I do work with people around the world through Skype, and I'm invited to do seminars in different places, and things like that. And but basically, my email would be the easiest way for people to get in touch with me, and that's on my website.
I'll link to it just in case you end up changing your email or whatever. But yeah, we'll just put links to Dale's site in the show notes if you're listening to this podcast or if you're watching on YouTube or whatever. Just click the link below, go to the show notes. You can go, the link to her website, contact information, and all that kind of stuff. Links to her books.
My books are on Amazon.
Good.
And also on my website, they can be purchased too. So they're out there.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much again. This is amazing. And I look forward to staying in touch, of course. And we'll talk very soon. Please share this. This interview was amazing. If you've made it this far in the interview, you know how awesome it was. Share it on Facebook. Share it on Twitter. Just share it with people you care about. And because just the world needs to know that cancer can be healed. And we need your help spreading the message. So
spreading the message. Absolutely.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you on the next one.